It is December 10th, 2022, and my cat Bambi and I are sitting here. It's a Saturday early afternoon, and the book I want to discuss with you today is The Notebooks of André Walter. The Notebooks of André Walter, written by André Gide. I believe the original French edition was published in 1891, and the English translation by Wade Baskin was published in 2012. André Gide won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1947. And this notebooks, the Notebooks of André Walter, kind of like his alter ego creation through which he wrote these poetic diaries, was one of the first books that he published. Maybe even his first book. I need to double check that. As you might recall, the most recent book that I discussed on the channel was Milan Kundera's novel Life Is Elsewhere. And I thought that a book that would go really well as a companion, as something that you could read on the side around the same times, maybe before reading Kundera's Life Is Elsewhere or after reading it, would be these notebooks, the André Walter notebooks. Because in Life Is Elsewhere, you're reading about the life of a poet, but you're not really immersed in that poetic perspective. You're not really getting immersed in that life of the poet, what he would write in his journals. And if you want to get immersed in that, then the notebooks of André Walter would be the place to go, one place to go. The book is described as being chaotic and disorganized, like any realistic notebook, any realistic journal or diary. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that when you write a diary, when you really allow yourself free expression, free play of language, you have to let go and counteract the ordinary forces that organize our lives. I'll give you an example. An example is that I have been kind of sick with cold/flu, a recent virus that I caught. I've been sick with it for more than a week, and I've been going to work almost every day. I took 3 weeks ago, I took one day off because it was just not possible for me to go to work. But the past week, even though I was kind of sick, sore throat, runny nose, and body pain and headache, I continued to go to work. And when I was at work, when you are at work, when you're, go to work, go to the office, go to and participate in your organization, in a company that is organized and also organizes you, organizes your body, organizes your conduct. When you are feeling sick, when you're feeling maybe not physically sick necessarily, but when you're not in the mood to work, when you're maybe feeling a little bit gloomy, a little bit out of it, and then you still go to work physically, you might realize that, if you make this observation, you might realize that your sickness doesn't really belong there. Your sickness doesn't really have a place there. You have to neglect your sick body. You need to set that aside, push that into the margins, and keep your focus, keep at the center of your experience your work responsibilities. Okay, so that's just what it means to be organized at work. And work is one way to be organized. Our relationships also organize us. There are certain things that don't belong in a marriage. There are certain things that belong or don't belong. Even in my relationship with my cat Bambi, there's some things that he's comfortable. There's some things that fit there in this relationship, because the relationship also has its own structure, has its own organization, has its own rhythm. But when you decide to stay true to your experience, when you decide to make observations about everything, then sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes you get attracted. You move in the direction of something that is suppressed because of the organization. So somebody who has a poetic sensibility, somebody who allows their sensitivity, their natural sensitivity to freely observe, then they might pay attention not only to the work that they are doing, but also to the discomfort of their body. Maybe they might feel and give voice to that discomfort of the body. My body wants to rest. You might just think, you might think that, or you might write that as a note in your notebook. And so just keep going with that logic, keep going with that. Let that logic take you to its natural consequence. And everything becomes a matter of observation, which means that your set of observations as a whole will not be as organized, and there will be a chaotic character to them. And that's why when you look at these notebook entries, the notebooks written by André Gide, they don't pursue an organized totality. They don't pursue one single purpose. They're just making observations about lots of different things. For example, his desire for intimacy, or some religious sentiments having to do with the desire for a divine relationship to the divine, relationship with God, or maybe some guilt feelings as a consequence of what is perceived to be immoral uh, relationships that the author has. The notebook contains lots of aphoristic statements. Like one line that I really like is, "The soul is our will to love." That's how he defines soul. The soul is our will to love. That's, I think, very beautiful. There are also lots of puzzling statements in the book that, for me, they demand a bit of pause and reflection, extra thought to get the meaning from them. For example, I just read you another short passage. He writes, quote, "Phenomena are signs that make up a language, the language of the desires that lie behind phenomena. Only desires matter, and they must be understood." So this is he's referring to that artistic responsibility, that you are responsible to your desires. You are responsible to understand your desires, not necessarily act based on all the desires that you find in yourself, but at least understand them rather than habitually and forcefully suppressing them. Here's another really beautiful and truthful observation. Quote, "Often preoccupation over appearing to be excited supplants the genuine emotion. Many times I have been with you, Emmanuel, and felt the true spontaneous emotion vanish under the attempt to force it to the surface. Suffering consists in being unable to reveal oneself and, when one happens to succeed in doing so, in having nothing more to say." End quote. Later he says in the second half of the book, called The Black Notebook, language is only for ordinary emotions. Extreme emotions are lost in the attempt to reveal them. So he's talking about the attempt to control our desires. Let's say you're giving a presentation at work, or you're showing up on a romantic date and you want to appear excited. And that attempt to show yourself, to present yourself as having an emotion, destroys the actual emotion that might be underlying. And this is a paradox that he's describing in terms of suffering. Suffering consists in being unable to reveal oneself. Can't reveal, you struggle to reveal your true emotions. You try to show how you feel, you can't. And when you can, when you happen to succeed in doing so, in having nothing more to say, nothing more to add, kind of reaching a roadblock, an expressive roadblock. There are also very existentialist themes throughout the book, themes that, when you look at a philosophical project, when you look at an artistic project, when you look at the way people pursue things, it is not reason that fuels them primarily. It is not a philosophical system of justification that compels people to do stuff. It is a kind of primal will. So, for example, he writes, "I have never had any happiness which reason sanctions." Later in the Black Notebook, he writes about Spinoza. And he says when he's reading Spinoza, he doesn't care about the truth of his arguments. He wants to read Spinoza, he admires him, but for a reason that is totally other than rationalistic admiration. So he writes, quote, "What I admire in Spinoza is not so much reason itself, but rather power, number, especially will, and then the rhythm of his system. I admire his divine tranquility. as I admired the Iliad, and without troubling myself over the question of its truth. So he said, remember, he's talked about language being on the surface and then the desires operating underneath. It is the desires that we need to understand, according to Gide. It is the desires that we need to give voice to. When Kundera criticizes the poetic, lyrical sensibility, he criticizes in part that lack of commitment to truth. He says that a poet might say something and then a moment later say the complete opposite. Because the poet or the poetic imagination is not really concerned with the rational criteria of evaluating. It's the poet is concerned with the force that is behind this statement, and the force itself might not be directly revealed in the things that the poet says. And that's fine as long as we are aware of that process of translation. In general, the notebooks are, I'm not sure if I would recommend them. Like, this is something that my channel is perceived by many of the people who watch the videos. They think that every book that I talk about is a recommendation. I don't necessarily recommend the Notebooks of André Walter to people. Just, okay, if you haven't read a book in a year, pick up this book. This book is something you would enjoy. No, I don't think so. I would very seriously doubt if you would enjoy reading this book. But if you enjoy a series of random journal entries written in the late 19th century by a philosophical, somebody who's committed to understanding their moment-to-moment emotional tone, somebody who uses a lot of musical metaphors, a lot of musical references, somebody who is struggling with loneliness, but not only loneliness and a desire to be with the beloved, but they're also concerned with religious, philosophical, moral systems that seem to demand from them the continuation of that solitude, continuation of not being with the beloved. So if you would like to spend some time with that kind of perspective, then sure, give it a try. But it is not one of those books that I would strongly recommend, because I don't think that most of us would immediately find it relatable or beneficial. It is interesting in many ways, but there are other places to go for these similar themes. Maybe we can talk about, I mean, a book that I will maybe get to at some point, Marshland, is one that was made popular by the New York Review series, and then his autobiography. Anyways, I would like to remind you of, again, my reading group that currently meets on Saturday mornings, Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Time. The next meeting is going to be about Slowness by Milan Kundera. The meeting after that will be about identity. If you're watching this video maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, the schedule to my reading group, if it is still ongoing by then, the schedule is still available through the link below. If you would like to support the channel, please press the like button, subscribe, and consider supporting also on Patreon, which gives you access to lots and lots of exclusive content that is not available through the official channel. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your encouraging comments and feedback, and I will speak with you in future videos.